Hello, welcome to Atheist Torah Study. My name is Emma, and today we're going to be discussing Parsha Tetzaveh. Parsha Tetzaveh is in the book of Exodus, Shemot, um, chapter 27, verse 20. So in Tetzaveh, God needs a wardrobe. Um, This is the eighth Parsha in the book of Exodus. It's the 20th Parsha in the Torah cycle, which means I've done, sorry, 20 episodes of Atheist Torah study already. Unbelievable. I'm still not quite halfway through though. Um, According to the notes that I looked up, this is the only Parsha in the Torah that does not mention Moses. But that's not really significant for atheists. But every commentary I listened to or that I read about Parsha Tetzaveh mentioned that this doesn't mention Moses. So I'm just saying it. Um, this Parsha is about the priestly garments that the high priests wear and about the consecration of Aaron and his sons, daily offerings, and the golden altar for the incense, and also oil for the lamp. So basically, everything in this parsha is about the stuff that's in the hypothetical temple that exists out in the wilderness. So that's what we'll be talking about today. It's a rich, rich source of topic for atheists because there's a lot of questions you can ask yourself. I mean, one of the first questions you might ask yourself is, why does God need a wardrobe? I mean, why does an all-powerful, non-physical being care about textiles? So this feels more like institution building than it does like theology or well, it's this we'll get into it. Anyways, so there's a lot of sartorial choices here. This is a very art sartorial parsha. Um, Another point of view that we might get to today from the atheist perspective is that this is about the manufacture of sacred authority. So Aaron and his sons are appointed as permanent priests for all time. And so, you have what is basically the establishment of a religious hierarchy. And I will get into that some more as we read the Parsha. I mean, I don't think that the idea of setting up a permanent religious hierarchy is anything that is unusual at the time. I mean, I think that if you look at almost every religious culture in the Levant, they had religious hierarchies. And it's kind of interesting too. I mean, I'm not an expert on the history of the development of culture in the Levant. I mean, all I know is about like the really big empires, and I don't really even know that much about how they developed, but it seemed like they all had priesthoods. And so, here you have another priesthood. I don't think it's that different. I mean, I think that part of what I have been realizing as I've done this year-long exploration of the Torah from the perspective of an atheist is that it's okay to say that this tradition looks like all the other traditions that existed at the time, and it also looks like the way that people do their traditions now too, because um, all of these religions have a lot in common. I mean, they have a lot in common in terms of how they establish their hierarchy, um, how they construct their spaces, and what they ask the people who believe in their tradition to do or to give to them. So there's just so much commonality among all of these religions. And I mean, as an atheist, I think that, well, I mean, for one thing, it's interesting because for atheists, I don't feel like, I don't know. I mean, atheists don't, this isn't, this isn't about us. I mean, I don't, we don't have a book, so there's not a book to analyze like what atheists tell themselves about how to construct their space and how to assemble and who to listen to. I mean, there's there's times in history when atheists do build up a little bit of social currency or a little bit of steam, like that happened with the quote unquote new atheists, like in the 90s and the 2000s, and the to the early 2010s. And that was a short time when I think that there was a little bit of a following of a few atheist thinkers. And then that kind of drizzled out. And now there's nothing again. I mean, right now we're living in this time when there's so much of an emphasis on like kind of a forced nationalism, a forced religious identification, and the kind of like a forced merger of nationalism and religion. And so like even within popular culture, even though there's a lot of really great atheist writers and there's a lot of really great atheist thinkers circulating around online and in some social circles, um, well, I don't know. I guess it's not totally true. I mean, atheists actually do have gathering places. Maybe we don't have buildings, but atheists do have gathering places. I mean, when I think about it now, atheists do have, they have, at least in the United States, they have a big national convention that all the atheists are invited to every year. It's the American Atheists Convention, and it's a pretty big deal. They have a lot of speakers, and it moves around from place to place. And I guess there's a culture of atheism. I mean, it's, I don't think it's nearly as developed as the culture of religion is. I mean, the culture of religion is pretty well established in the Western world, and I mean, I don't know if I can speak the same about uh, Eastern religion because I'm just not as familiar with that. I mean, Hinduism, um, Buddhism, Shinto, or African religions. I can't really speak to those. I mean, I'm mostly familiar with Western religion, and that's pretty well established. Anyways, I'm wondering. A couple of other things that maybe we might look at from an atheist perspective in this Parsha. Um, Again, the disappearance of Moses's name. I don't know why this keeps coming up because it's like I don't really care about the fact that Moses' name isn't mentioned. It's completely pointless. I mean, this whole text is a manufactured text, but since there's so much commentary on the disappearance of Moses' name, from a secular perspective, this highlights how texts can shift authority from charismatic leadership, such as Moses, to a bureaucratic priesthood, such as Aaron. It may reflect competing ancient power centers, prophetic tradition versus priestly tradition. And that's something that we can talk about. It's actually kind of interesting from an atheist perspective to talk about that. So maybe we will today. If you like the documentary hypothesis, Tetzaveh is associated with the priestly source. That's P. And the priestly source is highly concerned with ritual precision, lineage, garments, sacred space. Um, Tetzaveh is also about ritual as a way of kind of creating order. It's this this imposed order that's constructed through ritual. And how is it that within your head that you have this idea that you see a ritual and you somehow identify with it? I mean, so the ritual that they do here includes animal sacrifice, blood on their ears, thumbs, and toes. If we get to it, there's a really interesting section in the Parsha that's all about like what you do with the internal organs. It's like really, oh my God, this is the weirdest, this is one of the weirdest Parshas in the Torah. It's a really weird Parsha. I'll probably jump around so I get to some of the stuff I really want to get to, but anyways, um, a lot of the ritual that happens in the Parsha is designed to build psychological weight. It's designed to create legitimacy. It's designed to discourage questioning, and to enforce the idea that only specialists can do it correctly. So, who benefits from a system where only trained elites can interpret some kind of information? Um, Two more atheist perspectives I might get to today when I'm talking about this. So in the last Parsha, God dwells among them. And here in Tetzaveh, access to God becomes mediated through priestly systems. So there's a shift here from the idea that God moves around everyone into the idea that God is connected to this specific place. So the idea of like the connection that these people have to their God becomes highly centralized. And this is like a space where it becomes centralized. So it's kind of interesting because I think that's something that marked a real shift in Jewish tradition. I mean, it's interesting because in the Torah doesn't it gives you some ideas about the Torah gives you some ideas about how Jews are going to end up practicing Judaism for the next 2,000 years, because Exodus itself is a parsha about kind of moving around, which is what Jews have done for most of human history. So it's kind of interesting because it's this. I mean, Jews were out. It's like my understanding. This is just based on, me. I'm a total amateur, but my understanding is that like there was a place called El Yahud, and it was a place where people who began to identify as Judean began to create some kind of identity around maybe the ninth or 10th century BCE. And these Yehudins, there was somehow they also were connected to the Canaanites, and eventually these people lived in this area in the Levant where they created two kingdoms, a northern kingdom, Judea, no, I mean a southern kingdom, Judea, and a northern kingdom, Israel. And at some point in like the 6th or 7th century, I think, the northern kingdom got conquered by the Syrians or the Babylonians, and then the southern kingdom was conquered by the Babylonians, definitely. There was the Babylonian exile, and the people in this kingdom, this Judean kingdom, kind of got exiled to Babylon, and also they moved around to other places. So there was a lot of moving around in the history of Jewish experience before the construction of the Torah. And then it's everything kind of came together. It sort of congealed for a while. And and I think that's what the Torah is really. I mean, the Torah is a time when everything's kind of congealing together, and like the people who feel like we've always been this like really solid group of people, during all of this time of conquest and moving around from place to place and having these shifting identities, kind of everything sort of congealed in one place where like some elites who were very aware and cognizant of what's happening in the world around them realize that they're looking around at how other cultures are dealing with their religious narratives, and they realize that if they write a religious narrative that this might be really useful for them, and they're seeing, due to their exposure to other cultures, in a lot of ways due to the influence of Hellenism, I mean, the influence of Alexander kind of conquering basically most of the known Western world at the time. And but conquering the Western world in a way that was a little bit different. It was kind of like the way the Babylonians did it, but not quite too. It was even more different than that. But I mean, I think that this Greek influence of like running over the entire Western world and sort of in some way trying to tie it all together, it had an effect on the cultures that were conquered, for sure. And I mean, I think that one of the things that it did at this time, I mean, I think this is why I mean, I really do think the Torah was probably really compiled, put together in about the second century. It's just really interesting. But during the Hasmonean period, is because, the people at that time, there was this time when everything sort of congealed. And these people thought, well, we've shaken off because eventually they did get rid of the descendants of the Greeks. I can't remember what the name of that was. There's a name for it. It begins with an S, but I can't remember it right now. Anyways, they threw them off. And so for a while they had their own territory. This was the time of kind of flourishing. And so while that was going on, they created this religious text. And I think the idea behind the religious text was to create uh, a centralized religious identity. I mean, I think that's really interesting. So then, and so for a while there was a centralized identity. But then, of course, it all got destroyed by the Romans. And after it was destroyed by the Romans, then it was basically an exilic religion again for the next 1900 years until the 20th century. So, it's interesting because the religion has always been pretty much an exilic religion, although everything here in this text it's about this aspirational goal of coming together, this idea of like coming together. And anyways, I'm not sure what's atheist about that, but it's interesting. So I guess it's just, I mean, to me, what's atheist about it is just that it shows this idea that these people, I don't know, it's like, what motivates them. I mean, it's not easy to be an atheist, because if you're an atheist, then you have a different motivation for understanding the world and the universe. This is definitely not it. This is not the place to go to find your source code as an atheist. But it's also not necessarily something that you need to totally push against either. I mean, just because these people and this religion means something to them. I mean, there's like 7,000 religions on Earth. I mean, you know, at some point, you don't need to spend your entire life criticizing like all 7,000 religions because you just won't have enough time. I mean, you can just really broadly say, like I do. I mean, I'm an atheist. It's like these are all religions. I'll never know most of these religions. I'll never know like every way in which every religion tries to understand what their experience of God is. I'll never understand that. And I don't really understand why people keep on wanting to create gods. It's kind of beyond me. I mean, it's really, really beyond me. And the God that we've created in the Western world is totally beyond me. I don't understand why in the West we've created a God that is so much of everything. I mean, the God that we've created in the West is like the God of everything. It's like we just can't even stop pushing our God everywhere. It's like our God is in every corner of the universe and existed from the beginning of time and is like our chosen God or their chosen God. And, God had a son. He was a human being. I mean, it just goes on and on. God is everything. It's like, and again, here I'm just drifting all over Western monotheism. I mean, obviously, that does not include some of what I just said does not include Judaism, but a lot of it does. I mean, a lot of the source, unless, I don't know, I mean, unless maybe I just don't understand. Maybe every experience of monotheism is a different experience. Maybe I'm projecting what monotheism means, but I don't think so. I mean, I know this stuff pretty well, but I could totally be wrong too. Anyways, one last thing here. There's a couple more talking points I wanted to mention before we read the text. Um, there's a command in there for an eternal flame that must be maintained by humans. That one's really interesting because the eternal flame thing is total Zoroastrianism. I mean, Zoroastrianism, which I really haven't talked about at all on um, in this exploration of the Parsha, but Zoroastrianism was like such a dominant religion at the time that Judaism was kind of like developing as a religious tradition. And so there's all of this Zoroastrian influence on the text that like we just don't really see. I mean, unless we really notice it. There's a lot of Babylonian influence too. But the idea of the eternal flame, that's total Zoroastrianism. And but what's interesting about so from an atheist point of view, the when you look at the flame, the divine presence of the flame actually depends on human labor. And if humans stop tending to the flame goes out. And that suddenly reveals that religion is a human maintained system, which of course it is. I mean, it can't be anything else. Sometimes I think it's like I was watching, what was it? I was watching this really old movie on TCM the other day. It was really dumb. It was some really dumb movie I just had on in the background. And it had that guy from the 1930s who was really famous in the 1930s. And he had this big wooden puppet who like had a wooden hat on his head. And he was, this guy and this puppet, the wooden puppet who was dressed like like some really well-to-do 1920s gentleman. The puppet was dressed that way pretty much all the time. And this guy was in all these stupid movies with his stupid puppet. I shouldn't say stupid, but he was actually a very good puppeteer. But it's like sometimes I think maybe that's kind of how God is. It's like God is sort of like that puppet. It's like there's this guy and he's like mumbling into the puppet's mouth and the puppet's moving, and it's like it's a really good puppet and it really looks real. It looks super, super real, and it's like it's almost like that's sort of like how I don't know. Anyways, I mean, I understand God is much, much more than that in Western literature and Western tradition, Western thought. I think sometimes that's kind of what God is, though. And like, if you could just, summarize it in like one image, that's maybe somehow I see it. Um, so here there's also a lot of, again, so there's a lot of sartorial and other ritual objects in this text that are very they speak really to the essence of like how religions express themselves. There's a lot of gold in this parsha. There's a lot of precious stones, incense, dramatic clothing. So the idea of religious pageantry, the idea that something that's associated with a god or with a divine has to be really beautiful. It can only be God if it's something really beautiful and elevated. And also the idea that sacred spectacle overrides rational critique. So, if you were an atheist back then staring at this spectacle, you're supposed to be overwhelmed by it. And that's supposed to help you believe in God. There's also gender and exclusion here. It's only men. again. Of course, nowadays Judaism doesn't do that, which I really appreciate. I mean, my rabbis, both my rabbis are women. Um, Only male descendants may serve. So, and they have to be from this lineage of Aaron. So, and religious authority is biologically inherited. That's a huge problem. But that's not just a problem for the idea of religious authority. I mean, within Jewish tradition, it's very specifically a problem. I mean, you can only be a Jew. For most of the time, the understanding is, the only way that you're a Jew is if you're born to somebody who's Jewish, and that makes you a Jew. And that's, oh my God, that's so problematic. I mean, it's not problematic. It's not really. It's just, it kind of shows what I mean by problematic isn't maybe how I meant to say it. It's not problematic. It's, it just reinforces the idea that indoctrination is how religion is maintained. And I mean, within the Torah, it's very clear. I mean, it's very clear you're supposed to raise your children this way. This is exactly how you raise your children. This is what you make them think. This is what you tell them. And the religion has already assumed that for all time, this is how things are going to be. Like, so your children are going to be exactly like their parents and their grandparents and like going back all the time. And so this text has been written with the idea of like engineering the future. It's really interesting. I mean, atheists, we don't do that. That's one thing, it's like atheists, I mean, I'm an atheist. That's all I really am, you know, and I would never ever expect atheism to be something that is drilled into and expected of the future because that takes away, you know, the beauty of human thought, the ability. I mean, you can't tell someone to be an atheist because the only way that you can be an atheist is by making your own rational choice to be an atheist. I mean, but here all these religious texts are they're just completely concerned with making people into the religion that's been created. So the religion is like feeding itself. One of the good things about the text is that there really isn't any God in the text. I mean, God is sort of talking to people, telling them what to do, but there's not much God here. There isn't any moral teaching. There's no ethics. This is just ritual. So, this is a sartorial parsha. It's about ritual. It's not really about morality, but it does talk about what do you do in physical space to maintain a religious system. So those are some of the points we might get into with the text today if I ever start to read the text, which I'm going to do now. And I'll be jumping around a little bit. So for the last half of this, we'll be jumping around through the text and talking about it. So we'll start at the beginning, and like I said, I'm going to jump around a little bit. Tetzaveh, uh, Exodus chapter 27, verse 20. Oh, I just can't help it. I've got to do the blessing. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitanu mitzvah, tzivanu l'sog Torah. Okay. You shall further instruct the Israelites to bring you clear oil of beaten olives for lighting, for kindling lamps regularly. So that's interesting. It's telling you that they made their oil to burn their lamps out of olive oil. That's pretty much all it says. Nothing really to talk about their atheists, but um, I mean this is it's really clear. So even though this is about the even though this is about the Mishkan, this so the writers of the Torah at this time, I don't know why they spend so much time on this. I mean, well, I do, I already talked about it, but they spend so much time on this because it's like the people who wrote this, when they wrote it, were reverse, they were like they're both trying to reverse engineer the past and they're trying to forward engineer the future. So from the past, they're going to be they've got a text here to codify a religious expression, a religious institution. And so in order to like they have everybody in the Levant, not everyone, but a lot of people in the Levant are doing animal sacrifice. It's, you know, it's interesting because I was listening to an artist this week who was doing some art, a Jewish artist, and they were talking about making some art, trying to understand how people would feel guilt and how they would connect like a guilt offering with the system that existed at the time, which was animal sacrifice. And there was something about the way that this artist was choosing to explore her theme that I found really moving. I mean, it really made me think like, oh yeah, these are it took me out of the like, you know, the bloody animal sacrifice stuff that some of this text has, like where it talks about entrails and, like you burn all the cud and you know you sprinkle the blood on everything and just it's just oh my God, it feels like slaughterhouse. It feels like some kind of horror movie. I mean, I just can't imagine how people would think chopping up animals and having this bloodbath somehow could have any meaning, I mean, and I mean, but these people, they were around animals all the time. The ancient Near East was very dirty. It was pretty smelly. There's a lot of animals. There's blood, there's death, there's disease. I mean, it wasn't some clean, sterile world for anyone back then, pretty much. And so maybe this wasn't such a big deal. It's everything is context, and it's really important. Like one of the gifts of this text is that it actually is a text that's been preserved from that historical era. But one of the things that I wanted to say, and I've been thinking about this all week as I've been studying the text, is that one of the failures of these texts, and it's a really, really big failure, and it's now there are ways in Jewish tradition that this has been dealt with, but it's a big failure with all the Western monotheist religions, is that once they have a good text, so like for Jews it's the Tanakh. For Christians, it's the Bible. For Muslims, it's the Quran. And it's like once you have a text that you feel like, okay, we've got a whole book here. This is enough to occupy somebody for the rest of their lives. It's like an instruction manual for how they're supposed to live their life. So it's like once you got the text, then you're stuck with it and you don't do anything new with it. I mean, with Jews, at least they did 1,000 years of Talmud. They spent 1,000 years writing the Talmud, which is like the Talmud is huge. It's like I can't remember how many volumes it is. Is it 47 or I don't know. It's a lot, and each one is like a tractate. I've got one here, but I'm not gonna. You can go look at one if maybe next week I'll have it right here ready to show. But anyway, so a Talmud is a tractate. It's a big book, and it's just about like say one part of the Torah, or it might be about something else too. But it's the result of hundreds of years of scholarship of people trying to figure out what their text means. So it's a way of trying to forward engineer the text. I mean, but the problem is, this is just a problem I see with all religions, is that they get stuck in the text at a certain time, and that text becomes the foundational text because there's something about it that caught for a minute. But the text is always going to be moored in its time and its place. And so in a way, the text kind of drag because this is just the nature of how we are. we read codes. I mean, we're a code-based species. We read codes. We, um, you know, we try to understand codes and use those as meaning makers. I mean, you can look at how the text itself, one of the things that's so fascinating about the Torah is that the text itself contains within itself a lot of references to the very foundational origins of Western script. It really it contains within itself some reference points and a lot of really interesting relational points to the origins of language. I mean, the idea of a codex, the idea of how you go from simple mark making to the disconnect between like where the mark means a specific, the mark is a symbol of something. And so the mark is the equivalent of the symbol, and that's kind of the first place that the text starts. And then over time, as people begin to use the same words over and over again for the same mark, then the word becomes connected to the mark. I mean, the word is always connected to the mark, but as it's really universal, it's just after it's done over and over again for hundreds of generations of speaking, not generations of people, but as it's utilized so pervasively, the mark becomes associated with the sound, it becomes associated with the symbol, and eventually the symbol drops off. So like something might have at one time it might have been a bird, and now it's just a mark. And the mark is the same as the sound. And so the mark and the sound are the same. And then they even go deeper into that and they start to break up the sound into parts like ooh, ooh, ah. Like the different parts of the sound then become equivocal marks and then of course there's numbers happening at the same time. So while all of this is going on, you have the development of language. And this takes a long time. This takes a really long time for all of this to happen. But eventually you have language. And then you have language, but now you don't know what to do with it. What do you do with language? I mean, the whole time that you have language, people are still telling stories, obviously. They're telling each other stories and they're making rules. But now you have language. And so now you have this hypertext. When I say hypertext, I just mean like you have these texts. You have the Western monotheism. You have the Tanakh, you have the Torah, you have the New Testament, you have the Quran, you have all of these religious texts, and in other cultures you see the same thing. You see the development of sutras and you know and books. And so you have these hypertexts, and you have the hypertext which kind of goes over all of this other stuff that's happening before. Now, all of the things that happened before, starting all the way back with the codex and with really basic mark making, like these are just natural evolutions. It's not that there's anything about them that is unnatural. But then you get to this point where you have this text, you have this hypertext, which I would call these religious texts, and they get stuck. They get stuck because it's just like, and it's right here in this text. I can already tell I'm not going to get to hardly any of this text today. I'm just going to be talking the whole time. So sorry about that. But in this text, which you see here in Tetzaveh, is that, and you see it throughout this portion of the Torah, the people who are writing the Torah in this part are really interested in the idea of imposing a religious nationalism. And the reason that they're interested in imposing a religious nationalism is because they're trying to impose some kind of order for their society. And they want an order that's going to work for the future. It's like they want a future order. And in a way, they got it. You know, I mean, in a way, that's part of why people do religion. And that's part of why people do these texts, because they really work. It actually does give you a way to control your population going into the future. And not just to control them right here, like this text was designed as a way of like creating a religious nationalism. So it was completely tied to the idea of a state, of a land, of a place. It was a religious nationalism. So it's like a place where everything works according to your fantasy of how you think your God exists. And it's a religious nationalism. It really is. Now, in my opinion, what happened with Western monotheism, and I think really this something similar happened in the East, was that this, I mean, it's pretty, oh, sorry, hang on just a minute, let me close this. Okay. So what happened with Western monotheism, and I think what also happened in in the East was that after these texts were an attempt to set up a religious nationalism. And what happened next, like the next obvious step, was to set up a a colonial national, I mean, a colonial text, a text that, so in a way, the text is trying to do the same thing now that it did, that the Babylonians were doing. So it's like, it's following, again, these impulses that I think are just maybe part of how human beings try to organize themselves to optimize their power. I mean, I think that like when the Babylonians were going around conquering the world before this text was even written, when the Babylonians were going around conquering the world, they wanted to bring all the world's religions back to Babylon. And their religious temples were like this vast assemblage of like a lot of different aspects from all of the different things that were going on around them. And they kind of wanted this like universalism, like right there in Babylon. And I think that what the text does is the text, and is not the Torah specifically. The Torah is very, very locked into like a certain kind of religious nationalism. It's like the religious nationalism of being Jewish, and it's very specific how you can do it. And so that's part of what makes it sort of distinct that way. Um, but the some of the other tradition oh, what happened? Some of the other traditions, sorry, I just lost my train of thought. What I was trying to say is that this is a text that's really focused on religious nationalism, but what you can see that happened kind of as the next step in the evolution of this process is that you had texts that then took the idea of a religious nationalism and they made it into a colonial, like a religious colonialism. And so they took a text that was really intended just for like a nation or for like a particular people, and they made the text a text that was like part of a colonial identity, which again, there's nothing new under the sun. I mean, the idea of like creating and imposing colonial identity on like all conquered peoples that a Western colony or an Eastern colony has, an imperial power has colonized is not anything different in a way from simply colonizing them. It's just that the idea of having a colonized text is a way of like making it easier to manage all of those colonies. And so, Western religion, I mean, Christianity became the default religion of the Roman Empire. And so basically everything that had been part of the Roman Empire, which was like, basically all the territories that were colonized, that were conquered by the Romans, Germany, I mean, not at the time it wasn't Germany, but the Gauls, the Celts, I mean, all of a lot of the Mediterranean, this all became Christian because it was Roman. And the reason it became Christian, though, was because it had a text. It had a text that like grounded its narrative. But then the problem is that text, it's a really ambitious text and it tries to do too much. Well, it doesn't just try, it's a crazy text. I mean, they're all a little crazy, but they all try to forward engineer time. And so like I'm not as familiar with Islam. So it's like Islam is a little different, but Islam still follows this basic pattern. I mean, but I know for sure Judaism and Christianity both try to colonize time. So it's not just that they're colonizing like the land and the people, but they also have to colonize the future. Colonize is the right word for Judaism. It's the right word for Christianity, but it's not the right word for Judaism. In Jewish tradition, they're trying to like say that the Torah is eternal. It's for all time. So it's like for for Jews and for people who are Jewish, it's supposed to define their identity and their children's identity for all time into the future. In Christian tradition, it's a little different. I mean, but it's still by the time you get to these colonial texts, though, by the time you get to like they're all still really related. I mean, they're very, very deeply related, and a lot of them have to do with how you organize your society. This is an attempt to create texts that, in some foundational way, sort of organize the society. So that's what I got from reading the first line of the Parsha. Uh, like I said, I'm not going to get through much of the text. I never do, but we'll get through a little bit more. Aaron and his sons, this is verse 20. Aaron and his sons shall set them up in the tent of meeting outside the curtain that is over the ark from evening to morning before God. It shall be due from it shall be due from Israelites for all time throughout the ages. Okay, I just talked enough about that, so you get it. Oh, but there was more I wanted to say about that. I missed the whole point of it. Okay, so the point of it is that when a text gets stuck in time, like it does, even though it may be trying to organize everything about the society and maybe the people think, oh, we're brilliant, but the problem is that evolution is still happening. I mean, not evolution like from an evolutionary sense, but human evolution is still happening. I mean, technology is happening and language is happening and multicultural experiences happening. Things are happening, and everybody's talking to everybody else. And so, like people are figuring out how to use gadgets in new ways. There's new ideas coming up. And so the whole time that all of this, there's a text that's underneath all this. And it's the human text. It's the human experience. And the human experience just it just asserts itself into everything it does. There's something just foundational about human beings. I mean, we're creative, we're innovative, we're experimental, we're revolutionary. And people always want their freedom. People want a good life for themselves, and they want to be able to live their lives without having authority being completely imposed on them. I mean, there's these things that drive human identity, and they're just irrepressible. I mean, religion's gotten to the point where like religion sort of tries to pick out human traits and human characteristics, and it tries to control some of those characteristics. But the thing is that I mean, luckily, unless religion somehow genetically engineers people into being just completely obedient slaves, like people are always going to rebel against religion because religion is always trying to control them. And so, anyways, one of the nice things about humanity is that it always pokes its way through all of these systems. And the problem with the text is that the text doesn't move. It doesn't change. I mean, there's always going to be people who are going to want a God. They're going to want some kind of security. And if there wasn't a God, then they would invent one. And that's always going to be part of human identity because, it's scary being a human being. I mean, we don't know why we exist. Um, and then we live and then we die. And it's like, it's just so hard to accept that that's our, that our brains, it's like that's all we got. We have this experience and then we die and that's it. And it's like we want our lives to be so much more than that. We want people to know we existed, and we want to know that we're going to exist, and we want to know that there's a moral way to do things in the world, and there's a just way to do things, and we want to know that there's some basic fairness. I mean, when horrible things happen for reasons that we have no control over, we want to feel like that's not, that we're not some sort of guinea pigs and some experiment of randomness and uncertainty, and that's why there'll always be gods and there'll always be, rules, and people will want that because we don't have any guarantees. We have absolutely no guarantees about anything. We're born into these systems. We don't have any control over them. And I think that part of what the religion is about is, I mean, I think religion is always fundamentally atheistic because it's like religion at its base knows, every religion around the world knows at its base that there isn't any God. And the reason it knows that is because there's never been any God. I mean, there's never been any God to ever do anything for anybody. It's always been human beings doing things for themselves. But a lot of times, the way that we try to set things up in the world, we really screw up, like we're really screwing up right now with the planet, I'll tell you. And here in the West, in the United States, at this point in history, we're really screwing up with our government too. I mean, our government is a bloody mess, and it's going to be a mess for a long time now because of all the stupid things our government's doing. But of course, that just totally caused me to lose my train of thought. So why don't I read a little bit more text here? Not much, but we'll read a little bit more. I think I have said everything that I wanted to say today. So I feel I feel really happy about that. Because I think I got to, even though I've only read 2 lines of text so far, I think I've gotten to most of the things that I wanted to say about the text, which is the whole point of doing this. Because I never hear atheists really talk that much about the text. I mean, we don't, because it's like if we're atheists, the last thing that we want to do is deal with religious texts. I mean, I'm kind of a weird atheist that way. I mean, I belong to a synagogue, and the people in the synagogue are my friends, and I really enjoy seeing them, and I enjoy going to study Torah with them. I mean, I don't really do the religious stuff. I don't like daven. Except for Yom Kippur. I'll go to Yom Kippur because I really like that service. But I don't really do the religious stuff, and it doesn't really mean that much to me. But Jewish tradition has always been inclusive. And, it's like it's okay to be an atheist and to like hang out in Jewish space and be like, I don't believe that. That's bullshit. Here's what I think about that. I mean, maybe not all Jewish, maybe I'm in some weird bubble, but you know, um, there's something that's developed enough in the tradition that I can just, be part of it. So I appreciate that because they're also the other thing. I mean, one of the things I really like about Judaism is that it's very inclusive of transgender people, which I am. As a transgender person, it's really nice to just have some place where like I can go and, I mean, there's lots of places I can go as a transgender person and feel welcomed and included, but it's nice that this is also another place I can go. Of course, I'm also very welcome in my atheist community spaces too, which there's some really great atheist community spaces. I mean, it's really easy nowadays to be an atheist. There's so many great atheist blogs and um, podcasters, and there's a lot of great atheist gathering spaces. So it's pretty easy to get connected to other atheists if you want to connect with them. And of course, atheists, when we get together, we spend a lot of time talking about religion. That's part of why we're atheists, is usually because of religion. So, oh my goodness, I did not get to anything today. I read 3 verses. So it's actually a really good Parsha. I would encourage reading it. If you want to see what it was like to set up a Mishkan and what kind of clothes you wear and how you sacrifice an animal and what you do with all the blood. Um, there's a lot here. This is a good parsha for people who are artists, I think. I mean, it's a very DIY kind of parsha. It's like, here's how you do it, here's all the different parts, here's what they're gonna be. I mean, it's very performative. So it's a very performative text. It's a nice text. It's not a bad read. I mean, it's really not. There's some part, but it's good to read it, like, with an eye towards the historicity of it. Look at the text as a historical document, because that's the best way to read it. It's that there isn't a lot of God in the text. There's not a lot of Moses in the text. It's just mostly it's kind of performative, and it's kind of how you do your rituals. So anyways, that's all I have time for today. That's Parsha Tetzaveh. Thanks again for joining me for Atheist Torah Study. This is the 20th one. We're almost halfway through. I'm only doing this for 1 year, so I'll be glad when I'm done. But I've learned a lot. I've really enjoyed this. It's really helped me, like, learn more about the text and kind of get into it more. And it's just great to be able to say all the things that I think, even if it's just to a camera on a laptop. I'm just so happy to have this opportunity to say all these things. So thanks again. And if you happen to watch this, thanks for watching. You can always send me feedback at atheist torahstudy@gmail.com, and I'm on YouTube and TikTok. And then I also have a blog on Medium with the same name, Atheist Torah Study. It seems to be that nobody else in the universe thinks that Atheist Torah Study is an interesting word, so I kind of have the word right now.